Welcome to another Maamar we learned today in the Mizgeres of Project Melukat. These Maamorim are being learned l'schus, l'nishmas, our beloved Shiur, Cakiva Wagner. The Maamar we learned today is the Maamar Havaya, Hamarta, Havaya, Mircha, Tavshin Lamed. It's from Shabbos Parshas Tovei. It's from Chayelul, the Yomei Ledis of the Baal Shem Tov, as well as Alter Rebbe was Mugeh in Tavshin Mem Ches, which makes it Melukat Beis, which is the sefer we're learning now. The Maamar is Haamert, the Geschmack Maamar, where the Rebbe really gets down to the essence of, first of all, what Jewish people accomplish through Torah and mitzvahs, tremendous Iluyim, the Achdus Hashem that we create, and then in the end, given Tiffer, more than what we do is who we are, us, ourselves. The Rebbe chooses us, B'tuf Tam Mamish, and then throughout the Maamar, a few times, the Rebbe is going to, after every major inyan that Rebbe explains, he's going to stop to bring out how this is connected to Chayel, to the Baal Shem Tov, to Chassidus, to the Alter Rebbe. So let's get right in. Pasuk says, Havaya, Hamarta, Havaya, Mircha. This is Psukim that Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jewish people after he sums up all the mitzvahs, after Bikurim, after Vidui, that you chose the Eibishter. Hamarta and Hamircha means you chose the Eibishter. The way Rashi says it, Rashi basically says there's no real parallel to this word, Hamarta, but it means Havdalah V'Afrosha. That's Rashi in Torah. And Rashi in the Gemara says Loshen Shevach. In other words, we praise the Eibishter. That's a very more matim with the gang of this Maamar. And then the next pasuk is Havaya Mircha. The Eibishter chose us, Liyas Lam Skula, to be a chosen nation for him to do mitzvahs. The Gemara says on this pasuk, you made me into one entity in the world. The pasuk says, Shema Yisrael, Yidden here, Hashem Lekinu, Hashem Echad. Hashem is our Eibishter, Hashem is one. In other words, Jewish people made the Eibishter into one through saying Shema Yisrael. Al-Derech says the Eibishter, I in return will make you as well into one entity. Shema the pasuk says, who is like my nation, the Jewish people, one nation among the land, right? We are one. In other words, we make the Eibishter one, the Eibishter makes us one. What's pshat we say that we made the Eibishter into one entity? Which seems to imply that the fact that the Eibishter is one is created through the Jewish people, which is a very strange thing to say. Obviously, the fact that the Eibishter is one is an absolute truth that doesn't need to be created, right? This is the facts. And then the Rebbe takes it a step further and says, we compare the Eibishter making us into one to us making the Eibishter one, like there's a girsa, I think from the Yaakov. The Yaakov Shemedi brings a girsa, that just like you make me one, so too I'll make you one. In other words, there's a connection here. It's similar to the way the Eibishter makes us one, so too we make the Eibishter one, which just makes the question greater. Obviously, when it comes to the Eibishter making us one, is literally the Eibishter created the Jewish people as a people. The brackets, continuation of that very pasuk of Mikam Yisrael is that the Eibishter went himself to redeem us from Mitzrayim, to create a nation. Rashi explains, why are we chosen, singled out of all the nations? Because the Eibishter literally came to us and chose us and made us one. That makes us one people. The fact that Jewish people are one entity literally was created by Hashem. So how could you say the same thing? It must be that's pshat. We make the Eibishter one. In Havaya and Yisrael. And that's basically the question here. What's pshat? That the Yidden literally make the Eibishter into one. The next place, the Rebbe is going to go back into the context a little bit of the Gemara regarding what did the Eibishter Taka say this. And where do we know this from? So really, it's the Gemara is talking about the Eibishter's tefillin. And it says in the Eibishter's tefillin, it says, Mika amchi yisog echad ba'aretz, our praise in Hashem's tefillin. And the Gemara's question is, how is that pshat? How is it possible that we are the praise of Hashem? And the Gemara answers, look, yes, we make the Eibishter one. So that's going to be here, and the Rebbe is going to ask really two powerful questions, and within every question, details. Hine, base. This Pirush that we just explained. We make Hashem one entity, He makes us one entity. This comes in continuation what the Gemara says. What does it say in the Eibishter's tefillin? The Gemara answers, the Jewish people are one nation. And the Gemara asks, does the Eibishter praise himself with the praises of the Jewish people? And the Gemara answers, yes, the Eibishter does. It says, we chose Hashem and Hashem chose us. Like we learned, we make the Eibishter one entity in the world, He makes us one entity. So that is basically the answer to the question. What the Rebbe is going to challenge here is, well, how indeed did we answer the question? What's pshat? So let's go through this step by step. What's really the question here? Does the Eibusher praise himself with the Jewish people? Simple. Tefillin nikar pe'er. Tefillin is the beauty of a person. The pasuk says, your beauty is upon you, right? When a person wears tefillin, tefillin brings beauty and pride to the person who wears tefillin. So what's pshat tefillin in the Eibusher? Obviously Hashem's not wearing physical tefillin. It means the concept of pride. The Eibusher's proud, that is the concept of the Eibusher's tefillin. So what the Gemara is essentially asking is, what is the greatest pride of Hashem? What is his tefillin, his pe'er? What does the Gemara answer? We are his pride, and that's the Gemara's question. What's the pshat that Jewish people are the pride of Hashem? Does the Eibusher, so to speak, pride himself with the Jewish people? How could you say that the Eibusher's pride is a compliment which is Jewish people's compliment? Right? And that's really the Gemara's question. What's pshat that the Eibusher's greatest compliment is the Yidden are goyachad baretz? How do you make sense of that? That's our compliment, not his compliment. What does the Gemara answer? Metadas in. Havaya. Yeah. Somehow, as Havaya Marta, us making the Eibusher one, us complimenting Hashem, answers this question, that we are Hashem's compliment. Hamarta lashon chshivus v'shevach, and like Rashi and the Gemara there says, Hamarta means chshivus, we give the Eibusher importance, significance, we affirm the Eibusher, yep, pride, shevach, praise, as was. Yisrael, pelim chshivus v'shevach baruch hu, we create this beauty and this chshivus for the Eibusher. Frek the Rebbe now, a poshta klotzkash. Pshat, what's taka pshat in the question answer? Tzarich lahavin darai, ma pasuk zavaya marta hilchayri raksha kat baruch mishavech al deyah shavachim sheisrael mishaf moisis baruch havaya lekin havaya chod. What is this atem asisuni chutuvachas? What is the raya from the pasuk Havaya Marta? It means the Eibusher accepts our compliment. We say Shema Yisrael Shem L'Keshem Echad, which is beautiful, and through that Hashem is beautiful, right? Even though creation and creator are be'inarich, they're incomparable. We can't compare a human being to the Eibusher. Nevertheless, the Eibusher chose that through our praises he will be complimented, which is obviously a tremendous, tremendous thing. On the contrary, maybe it's a tremendous compliment for us that we have the ability to praise the Eibusher. But the question is, how did you answer your original question? You asked, is the Eibusher proud with us? And what do you answer? Yes, we compliment him. The fact that we could give a compliment to Eibusher is beautiful. That doesn't mean that the Eibusher's greatest compliment is the Jew. It's a whole greater concept. Where do you have arrived for that? Right? You have no raya that the Eibusher's greatest pride is the Jewish people. In other words, saying a compliment for the Jew is a compliment for Hashem. You have a raya that a Jew compliments Hashem. Beautiful. You don't have a raya that, making the Jew greater is making Hashem greater. That's a much greater idea that there's no zecher for in this concept, this beer. So what do you have to explain? Somehow, through the Yidden being able to compliment Hashem, the mere fact that Jewish people can compliment Hashem, and Hashem can accept that compliment, also leads us to the conclusion that the Eibusher is proud of the Yidden themselves, and we are his pride. And that's sort of love. And this is Vatam Verstehen. That our we're talking about this word, but somehow the fact that Hashem accepts our compliment means that we are his compliment. What's pshat? How do you explain it? Now that I was going to just explain further the question. It's the fact that in the Eibusher's tefillin, there could have been two things. It could have been the compliment that Jewish people give him. That would be Shema Yisrael V'Alekin V'Achad, but that's not his shevach. His shevach is the Yidden Alein. Kum tois, the pride, the compliment that we are for Hashem is the greatest compliment, even greater than what we tell him. So we tell the Eibusher a compliment that's not in the tefillin. We ourselves, that's the tefillin. That's the Eibusher shevach. This concept of the Eibusher is proud with the Jewish people's pride, with the Jewish people's compliment, with the Jewish people themselves. So not just is it muchach from the fact that we compliment Hashem, that we are Hashem's compliment, but that compliment that we are is the greatest compliment, even greater than what we do, what we accomplish, what we give him. This becomes this be'er's tefillin. So that's really question number one. Within our question, we have a few details, but the question basically is, first of all, how do you answer the question? Right? How do you answer, we are his pride, we are his tefillin, by saying we can compliment him? Muslims are they're one and the same, and we have to understand that, especially us being the greatest compliment. Question number 2, Masha. Maybe on Matzah Tzedek Maamar Havaya Amarta Yoyim. We have a Maamar of the Tzemach Tzedek discussing this pasuk. The Be'in Amarta V'Mircha Shtei Days, he brings 2 days. The Rashba, which the Rashba is on the Inyaki of Kosev Amarta V'Mircha Alderech Doidi V'Ni Loi, similar to the pasuk that says Doidi V'Ni Loi. The Eibusher is for us and we are for Hashem. In other words, it begins with Hashem and then it goes to us. The question is, seemingly it's fakert, because our pasuk says Havaya Amarta first. We make the Eibusher one, and then Hashem V'Mircha, Hashem makes us one. And the Marsha Taka says that. Simple. Hashem Amarta, Hashem Amircha. We begin, Hashem reciprocates. But Dafim Verstehen, Taka, what's pshat in the Rashba? It's much more similar to the Marsha that we are the initiators. Why does the Rashba say that it begins with the Eibishter? Fine. Those are the questions. So we have the question of is Aleph, what's pshat that we make the Eibusher one? The question is based is what's pshat that we are the greatest compliment of Hashem, greater than any other compliment, greater than even the compliment that we give him, is us. And what's pshat that it's the Eibusher initiating like Doidi L'Niloi. So Eis Gimel, what the Masber Zayin, what's Taka pshat that we create Achdus Hashem? In other words, going to the first question, it's going to be in Eis Gimel, Eis Dalid. Eis Gimel is a little bit, few pratim, a little bit complicated. You have to halt cup, but we'll try to make it as clear as possible. So let's see. Rebbe is basically going to tell us here in Eis Dalid how when we say Yidden create Achdus Hashem, there's 2 pirushim in Achdus Hashem, similar to the 2 pirushim in our pasuk of Havaya Amarta. 2 ways of making the Eibusher one, and this all happens through the Avodah of Yisrael, and that is a compliment. The Shevach is Taka created through us. So let's see. You call the bag the Masha maybe I don't tell the Maamar now the Bechaya. The Tzemach Tzedek in the Maamar brings a pirush of the Bechaya. Asvos the pasuk of Havaya Amarta begin Tetzvav of Asik Tetzvav Dorn Shei B'Mishkan. 15 words in our pasuk corresponding to the 15 materials used when building the Mishkan. Bechaya Shom, he continues. Hagufa. Why does the Mishkan have 15 materials? Sham Mishkan Dugmas B'Yas Ha'olam. The Mishkan is connected to creation as a whole. Tamad B'Yas Ha'olam, but the Mishkan is much because Hashem to Elamim. The reason why the Mishkan, as well as the entire world, is alluded in the number 15 is because Yud Kei Tzur Elam. The Eibusher created the world with Yud Kei, Yud and Hey is obviously 15. That's a gematria. Hainu. That is Masbir. Tezvav Advarim Shem Mishkan Reim Zval Yud Kei Gematria Tezvav. The 15 things in the Mishkan correspond to Tezvav, right? Yud Kei, the 15, the name of the Eibusher created the world. If that's Pshat, if that's a Taich, in other words, if the 15 things in the Mishkan are connected to Yud Kei that creates the world, and the 15 words of Ayamarta are connected to the Mishkan, right? So we have 3 concepts here. Muslim Zagin, that the 15 words of Ayamarta is connected to Shem Yud Kei. Right, if they're similar to the Mishkan, and the Mishkan is Yud Kei, Kumteis of Ayamarta is also Yud Kei. Mamshu B'chaya Shom, the B'chaya continues, Sheknegdo, Nekenegad Tezvav Dvarim Sheba Mishkan, Nipsu Tezvav Pom Tavku B'Shiv Rakim. In other words, what's Takib Pshat that creation reflects the concept of 15 is really there are 15 times 500 in our world. What's Pshat? The Rebbe brings in the order, very simple. You have 7 Rakim, right? Our world is made of 7 heavens. And every heaven is Mahalach Tavkuf Shana, is like a journey of 500 years. So you have a journey of 500 years, and in between every heaven you also have a journey of 500 years, and on top of that you also have 15, you have 500. So you basically have 7 plus 7, right? 7 Rakim, in between the 7 Rakim and 1 on top, you end up having 15 times 500. Tavkuf Tezvav. So our creation is Tezvav, is Yud Kei, the Eibusher is named Yud Kei, but Yud Kei times 500, which is connected to Veschanon, like we'll see. What's Veschanon? Tavkuf Tezvav. 15 times 500. Tezvav Pom Tavkuf. Yeah, 15 times 500 in our creation. Now let's take it a step further. Veschanon is not just like creation where there's 15 times 500. Veschanon, it brings it into one word. The 15 and the 500 now combine. What's Pshat? Shleimar. Now let's halt up. So again, let's just remind ourselves how we got here. Havaya Amarta is 15 words. Connect to the Mishkan, which is 15 materials, which is connected to the world, which is Yud K. Now in the world that's Yud K, it's not just 15, it's 15 times 500. Which means Zogin, that is Havaya Amarta, the 15 words of the Pasuk, is connected to not just Yud K, but Yud K times Tav Kuf, Yud K times 500. And once you understand Yud K times Tav Kuf, we'll explain how Havaya Amarta connects to Tav Kuf Tezvov. It's not just Yud K. Oh, just 15 materials. Just because Hashem Tzur. No. Yud K, right? Just like in Vaschanon, just like the world is Tav Kuf Tezvav, the Mishkan is not just 15. Havaya Amarta is not just 15, but it's 15 the way it connects to 500. What's Takip Pshat? 50 connects to 500. So let's see, very simple. How does the Havaya Amarta, the 15 words, connect to the 500 as well? Very simple. What is Takip Pshat and Havaya Amarta? We already explained the Razal. In the Havaya Amarta, it's in the Kud of Achdus Hashem. We're creating oneness. In what the Rebbe is going to tell us here is that in Havaya Amarta and Achdus Hashem there's two pirushim, and in the Chibur of Tav Kuf with Tezvav there's the same two pirushim, which combines. Then when we say we make Hashem one, there's two pirushim Achdus Hashem, which basically two pirushim in Tav Kuf Tezvav, and in Izdal we're going to say at least it's the same two pirushim you have in the Eibusha putting on Tefillin, which is all connected. So, what are the two pirushim in Achdus Hashem? Pirush Aleph, Havaya Echod, we say in Krishma, Shrai Yisrael Shem L'Ken Hashem Echod. Havaya Echod, Mishkas Varizal Al Pasuk B'Yemu Yeh Havaya Echod. It's like what the Rizal writes on the Pasuk when Mashiach comes, Hashem's name will be one. She Yudke and Vavke, right? Havaya is Yudke Vavke. The Yudke with the Vavke will be Echod. Yumikushan and Achdus Hashem will become one, which is basically Chibur Moichin Umidis. Yudke is Moichin, you have Chachma and Bina, right? The Yud, Chachma, the Hey is Bina. Midois is Vavke, you have the 6 Midois, and the Hey is Malchus. Pirush Habei. That's the first Pirush. Eibishter is Yichud Meichin Umidis. In other words, just a very short. You have the chelik of the Eibishter, which is Meichin, which is for himself, like a person's mind, which doesn't yet relate to an outsider. You have the Midos, which is emotions, which already the Eibishter connects to a world around him, which is Yud K, which is the way the Eibishter, so to speak, creates the world, the way the Eibishter connects to Azulas. A real Achdus Hashem is Bimegale, Bimekasher Meichin Umidis, taking the Elokus, which is connected to the world, and Bimekasher with the Eibishter's Moich, which is Hecher from Welt, but still within the realm of Seder Shalshus. That's the first Pirush in creating Achdus Hashem. Pirush HaBeis, the Pirush Havaya Chod, Wal Derech, Ani Havaya. There's another pasuk that says, Ani Havaya Leishinisi. What's Pshat? Ani Shu Atzmus Eritzei from Shem Havaya. Yavani Havaya. Ani is Atzmus, the essence. Havaya is Hishtalshlus. Yud Kei Vav Kei is Moichin and Midas together. The whole thing is Havaya. Kul Echad Mamish. And then you basically decide that it's all one. In other words, Hishtalshlus is really higher than Hishtalshlus. The Eibusher, the way he comes down into Meichin and Midas, is really the Eibusher which is higher. And it's all one. Ani Havaya Leishinisi. Ato Atchaloi Nivra'ilam, Masha Nivra'ilam. The way the Eibusher comes into Seder Shtalshus, the way the Eibusher is higher than Shtalshus is all one. So it's a much higher way of Achdus Hashem. Not that within Shtalshus, Meichin and Midas come together, but the Eibusher himself, Atzmus, which is higher than the whole Seder Shtalshus, is higher than Havaya, comes out and becomes Havaya. So, Masha Tezvov, Ani Havaya, yeah. So Masha Tezvov, Tevis, Bigmat, Yud K, Shem Pasuk, Havaya, Marta, Remez, Yud K, Kemoshim, Chaber, Michel, Tav Kuf. Now that we understand in Achdus Hashem, Franz Pirushim, Kumtois, in the Pasuk of Havaya Marta, which again is Achdus Hashem, now we'll understand why that connects Tav Kuf and Tezvav. It's not just 15 words, but 15 connected to the 500. Why? When you want to connect 15 with 500, you also have two pirushim. Dugmas Shneur Pirushim and Havaya Echod, which are similar to the same two pirushim. In other words, it's the same accomplishment. The same accomplishment we accomplished through creating Achdus Hashem in Welt is the same thing when we combine Tav Kuf and Tezvav. Pirush Aleph Tav Kuf Koyal Midrash Lamat Mameichin. Tav Kuf is Midos. Why is 500 Midos? Ikar Midos Imhea Midrash Mechesed Hoid. Right? We know there are 5 primary Midos, which is Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Nesach, Hoid. Chol Achamem Kol Miyud. Every one of them is made of 10, which is 50. Yud Miyud. Every one of those 50 is another 10, which is 500. Ultimately, right? You can zoom out, and everything becomes more. Or zoom in, and everything becomes more multiplied. So 500 is Remes to Midas. Gematir Tav Kuf. Therefore, Bechlal creation is in the number of Tav Kuf. Where did creation come from? From Hashem's Midos, right? Hashem says, I created the world with 6 days. B'shisha yamim, right? Also Hashem, Shesh Yama Savaya, that the Eibusher creates the world with 6 Midas. So what's Takab if Tavkuf over here means creation, Welt. So what's a chibur of Tavkuf with Tezvav? Tavkuf, Tezvav, Tevach is chibur Moichin, Yud K. What's Yud K? We already explained this Moichin, Yud Chacham and Bina, Mat Tezvav, Imam Midas, Tavkuf. So the first level of chibur, Tavkuf and Tezvav, is a chibur of Moichin and Midas. Very simple, similar to the first Nikudah in Achtas Hashem. We said Yud K and Vav K are Echad, Havaya Echad. Pirush Rishon Vayachad. Pirush Abei Tavkuf. Yeah, what's the second Pirush in Mekasher? 15 and 500 Tavkuf Tezvah. The Tavkuf Koyal Midas Arich Shalmal Mamoichim Emes is a Tifra Nikudah here. It's still Midos. It's still 500, but Midas are an Arich. What do we mean? Chlal emotions in the regular structure, the regular build of the person are lower than the heart and than the mind. It's being affected and it's governed by the mind. But if you think about it, the emes midos can be much deeper than the mind for a very simple reason. I could change my mind, I can't change my heart. My desires are much different. Why? Because they come from a deeper source. They come from toyum. They come from arich, keser. Kum dois, you have middays, so they're higher than moichin. According to that, in Tavkuf Tezvav is not that the Tezvav is in the kasher with the midas that are lower, but the Tezvav, the Yudke, the moichin is the kasher with the midas that are higher than the Shtalshus. In Tavkuf Tezvav, the kasher Chabad Chacham bin Yudke, Tezvav, in Keser Shamal Shtalshus, connecting Shtalshus with higher than the Shtalshus with Keser. Doing what's Pirush Sheni Vaychad, that would be paralleled with the second Pirush, Havaya Vani, Atzas Yitzei Shamal Shtalshus in Kol Echad, Ani Havaya, means Amir, Atzas Mahus, with Havaya, with the Shtalshus are one. So what do we basically just say very simply? When we say there are 15 words in the Pasuk, Havaya, Marta, we don't just mean Yudke. We mean a chibur of Yudke with Tavkuf, with Welt. What's Pshat? How do we know that? So the Cheshbon was, we're connected to the Mishkan is connected to the Welt, and the world is not just 15, but it's 15 times Tainadr because of the Rekim. Yeah, and it's connected to Veschanan. But ultimately, just like we have two Pirushim in Achtus Hashem, generally speaking, we also have two Pirushim in the Chibur of Tavkuf Tezvav. And the two Pirushim basically are either connecting with Inishtalshus, Moichin and Midas, or connecting Atzmus, which is completely higher than Ishtalshus with Ishtalshus. Kum dois, we create Achtus. Yeah, now let's see, it's Daled, I'm going to connect it to why this is so verbunden with the tefillin in the Moreh Alma. Why this concept of Atam HaSesuna Chetiv Achas is connected to Eibsh's tefillin. Why? Because in tefillin you have the same two ideas. Now we'll understand also why this Gemara is brought in connection to the tefillin of the Eibshter. The Gamsh tefillin Moreh Alma Ksiv Mikam Yisrael. Be'etzem, what does it say in Eibsh's tefillin? Our compliment, which is the second puzzle. Ultimately, they're all combined, all connected. Our compliment, the Eibsh's compliment is all one. Like we'll see in the continuation. In the Eibsh's tefillin, you also have these two concepts. Tefillin and Dal Moichin. What are tefillin? Bepashtus. There's four compartments, which are the four moichin, four levels of intellect. What's Pshat? The Eibsh with meniach and tefillin. He's going to, so to speak, draw down tefillin. Similar to the two pirushim which is explained. Aleph. Kadosh Baruch Hu meniach tefillin. Kadosh Baruch Hu is Zah, which is midos. Kadosh Baruch Hu meniach tefillin. I'm shachat ha'meichel Zah. That you bring that Kadosh Baruch Hu, you bring the tefillin, the meichin into Kadosh Baruch Hu into Zah, into midos. Chibur meichin and midos. And then I'm going to say in the brackets, what's the chiddush? I mean, obviously, midos are governed by meichin. That's not what we're talking about here. We're saying much, much deeper. Within Zah, within Welt, within midos, you have the essence of meichin, which is completely higher than Welt. Why? The fact that this happens regularly, typically, mind affects the heart. So you have some sort of amshocha. That is a part of the mind, which is the lower part of the mind, which already has the alulius, already has the potential, so to speak, to connect to midas. It's a lower part of meichin. That's what happens on a regular day, without any interference. Even that is evolution. It's a chain reaction. It takes a while. Yeah, many contractions. But midas is and then eventually, when this part of moichin becomes midas, becomes my emotion, it changes. Now already you don't even call it moichin anymore. It's so far from its original state, it's called midas. But that's the regular process. We say over here, yeah, the midas. When you say every midah ultimately has rationale, right? Every emotion could be justified. But that moichin, you can't even call moichin anymore. You can't compare it to the actual real moichin, which is literally objective academia, right? Rationale, just intellectualism. But that's not what we're dealing with here, obviously. This huge accomplishment where we say the Eibush is putting tefillin. In other words, the Eibush there, which is getting amshacha from tefillin, from moichin. We're talking about the essence of moichin, which is just subjective, yet just completely higher. And that also explains why it's such a great accomplishment. Why Hashem is, so to speak, so proud. Because what's pride? Pride is from something unexpected, something which doesn't really make sense, something which is be'en arich. When the Eibishter, when the Etzem HaMoich come in the Midas, this is Hashem's pride, that's Tefillin. So that's the first Pirush Hashem putting on Tefillin. It's a Nikud of Achdas Hashem, where even Midas is really Etzem of Moichin. Beis, which is, by the way, similar to the first Pirush we said earlier in Havaya Echad, that Havaya, which is Yudke Vavke, which is Ishtalshus, becomes one, the Yudke and the Vavke combine. Beis, another Pirush in Eibishter putting on Tefillin, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Atzim Seir Tzev, Shalom Atzilus. Kadosh Baruch Hu is not Zoh. Kadosh Baruch Hu is Be'emes, much different. It's the Eibishter, Alein, Atzim Seir Tzev, Shalom Atzilus, which is higher than Ishtalshus. Kadosh Baruch Hu, Menich Tefillin, Am Shoch Seir Tzev, Moichin, I'm bringing Ein Soif. I'm bringing the Eibishter's infinite, transcending light into Moichin, into Ishtalshus, into the more systematic part of Hashem that, navigates creation. So Pirush then moving to Yosser, Inna Pe'er the Tefillin, and now we can understand even greater, like we concluded in last brackets, the Pe'er, the beauty, the accomplishment of Tefillin. Obviously, when I'm bringing something completely higher than Ishtalshus to the Ishtalshus, that accomplishment is so great that it becomes the Eibishter's pride, the Eibishter's Tefillin. Now we're going to come back to answer the question. So what's Takeb Pshat that the Yidden are the Eibishter's greatest pride? Why are we in the Eibishter's Tefillin? So what's the answer? Like Rashi says, Hamarta is we make the Eibishter Choshev. We are the Eibishter's Tefillin, the Eibishter's Peir. These are all very simple. Because how does the Eibishter put on Tefillin? Through the Jewish people doing avodah. Therefore, we create the Eibishter's actus. Typically, if you just leave the system to play the way it does, typically, right, the regular rules of the system is you have moichin, you have midas, you have higher than that. Obviously, there's a link between all of them, but the link is a long process of evolution where eventually the light is so diminished that when it comes into our world, when it's in the world of midas, there's no resemblance of moichin. If you want to accomplish Achdus Hashem, if you want to beat the system, so to speak, that the etzem of moichin should be in midas, or that the etzem, atzim serin seif, should be in Ishtalshus, you need to have avodah of a yid. Avodah of yid interferes and breaks the system. Which is similar to the two pirushim, us creating Achdus Hashem, either yichud vavkim yudke, like we said, either within Ishtalshus, you're connecting the Eibishter with Meichel and Midas, yichud Havaya mani, or the higher way, which Havaya, which is Ishtalshus, with ani, with atzmus, then after the Avodah Yisrael, Tamasisuni, we are the ones who create that, we're the ones who done that. So far, we answered the first question, basically. We create Achdus Hashem. If you just leave the Eibishter to himself, so to speak, there will be levels in the Eibishter. There's the Eibishter himself, which is one take, that's Etzem. And then as you go lower, there's fragmentation, there's different levels. We make Achdus Hashem. We make Havaya Echad. There are two Pirushim, through us doing Avodah, the Eibishter puts on Tefillin, which is the Eibishter's greatest Pe'er, the Eibishter's greatest Shavach, that he truly is one. So thus is Merdik Ishmak, the first four Aces of the Maamar. And like we said, because it's a Chayal Maamar, so after every major Indian explaining the Maamar, we have here connecting it to the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. So now let's make a pause, so to speak, not a pause. It's Mamash Hemish Chinyonim here, but explain how this is combined with the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. You say, is a Torah of the Baal Shem Tov and a Torah of the Alter Rebbe. It's brought in both. On the pasuk, Va'ata Kaddish Yoishev Tehillas Yisrael. The pasuk says, "Do Heliker, Yoishev Tehillas Yisrael, sits on the praises of Jewish people." What's Taich? The Taich in the pasuk. The Eibush himself is Kaddish. He's holy. He's separated. By the Tehillas Yisrael, through the Jewish people praising Hashem. This is how he's Yoishev. Yoishev is Yashvus. He's drawn down. He becomes present here in our world. So in other words, the Eibush himself is Aluf, his essence, his Atzmos. We are the ones who make our world Elkus. We're the ones who bring the Eibush down. So it's Havaya Marta. This is also Pshat in Havaya Marta through us praising the Eibush, which is still Yisrael. We create Eibush and the first Indian is higher than Ishtalshus, into Ishtalshus. And then within our world itself, the greatest, highest Atzilus comes down into Midas, Meichin the Midas. So like if you say Ishtalshus, that creates that the Kaddish, the Eibishter, who's completely aloof and removed and transcends, should come down Lamata. Why? Because the regular system, if not for a Jew's avodah, it would have happened slowly, gradually, and every level would have become less. In our world, it's concealment. You don't see anything. I skipped the brackets. Then it comes out all the way down the mata. Here in this bracket, Rebbe explains a very important nekuda, which really answers a big question of Hoguf Akasha. What's Takab Shat? How indeed does a Jew have that ability to bring the Eibusher into the world, right? So what's the answer? The way the Eibusher can come down to the world is because the Shirish of this Amshacha is completely higher than worlds from the Eibusher's essence. Only through a Jew doing Avodah can we bring this Amshacha. Why? Because that is where our source is. Our source is from Atzmus. Ubemela, we have the ability through our avodah to be mamshich Atzmus. And when Atzmus comes, it's in every Eilim b'shaveh. So that's the pshat here. Jewish people, mamish create Achdus Hashem. If you would leave it up for the system of Yishtalshlus, it would have been differences, levels. Jewish people make it all one. Now that Rebbe is going to tell us, Mamshich Zayin, Yizvov, this is through Avodas Hashem B'chlal. Yizvov, Rebbe is going to tell us that it's Be'ikr through a Yid putting on tefillin. Why? Because when a Yid puts on tefillin, he has the same type of concept, bringing the Gereste Hechste, commitment to Hashem, into Moichid, into Midas, and even lower. Let's see. Be'ikr happens to accomplish through a Yid putting on tefillin. Why? Razal teaches B'chlal. The Eibishter, Magid Dvar of Yaakov, he teaches his words to the Jewish people. Chukim Shvat of Yisrael, his chukim, his rules, his ideas are given to the Jewish people, and explains what's pshat. Magid Dvarav Chukav Mashu Hu Oiseh Hu Emil Lasis. What he does is what he shares with us. When we do the mitzvahs, this is how we cause and we create. That the Eibishter do this mitzvahs, and the Rebbe says in the order here, bringing from the Maamar part of Shalom Lamed Ches, the first Maamar Melukat Beis that we learned. After we do it, it's even greater than the way the Eibusher does it, because he knows we'll do it. In other words, when we do it, we create in the greatest eifin. The Rebbe throws in here a verse of the Baal Shem Tov, which is again Chayel, right? The pasuk says Havaya Tzilcha, Hashem is your shadow. Literally it means he's your shade, he's your protection. The Baal Shem Tov teaches just like a shadow literally duplicates a person exactly what you do. Some shadows do so to the Eibusher. All the Nanim L'mayla are mirror the person's avodah. Now, obviously, it's every mitzvah. Like we explained, it's avodah of Yidin B'chlal, specifically tefillin, and happens to be that Rebbe brings out here how all Torah and mitzvahs are really hukshal tefillin. That through this, the concept, the fact that the Eibusher puts on tefillin happens specifically when a Yid puts on tefillin. What's the rationale here? What's the idea here? Why does the greatest Achdus Hashem happen when a Yid puts on tefillin? But let's understand what tefillin is. What is the kavanah of tefillin? Which, by the way, the Rebbe brings in the brackets from Shulchan Aruch, that the kavanah, the feeling a person needs, right? The emotion, the kavanah, the intent that you have when you do the mitzvah is a part of the mitzvah itself. It's not a side thing. You do the mitzvah with kavanah. Tefillin, you have to have this kavanah. It's part of the mitzvah. What is it? L'shabed alev hamoyach. To subjugate, to surrender, submit your heart and your mind, your emotions, your intellect, which is the build of the person. Was is shibud, Dr. Abdina, shibud, shemeshav latzim lukus, you enslave yourself to the Eibush. So on one hand we say it's similar to Kriya Shema. What's Kriya Shema? Shema Yisrael, you're being mekabel upon yourself, El Malch Shamayim, which is completely higher than Pratim, higher than anything. Ma'isa Nefesh, it's his Nefesh. So the Pashis will say Tefillin, Shibud is literally like Kriya Shema. Shibud Kabbalah Seil, Malam Tavadas, which is completely higher than the rationale. The whole concept of the Kabbalah Seil is that despite the fact that I might have no understanding or no feeling towards what I'm doing, I am a Eved, I'm submitted, yeah. Nevertheless, like the Rebbe, so that would be Kriya Shema. What's the accomplishment? What's the uftu of Tefillin? Tefillin takes it to that level. It brings this nekuda of Kabbalah Seil and brings it into detail. Kriya Shema stays essential. It's serious nefesh. You die for Hashem. Tefillin is that you live for the Eibusher every day of your life. You are, first of all, you surrender your Dalad Moichin, which is what's Takib Pshat in the Dal Moicha that Rebbe says here in the parentheses, how you have Chochma Bina, and then you have Das, which Das can split, because Das creates Midas, so you already have the Midas in the Moichin. So take the mind of the person, Shaloiv, then and eventually you bring it down to the heart. Tefillin are by the mind of the heart, Shibal Lev. Shloimar. What is really going on in Dr. Rebbe? There's really three concepts, three ideas similar to the two inyanim of Akhtas Hashem we said earlier. When a person, first of all, the first concept in Nekuda is similar to Kriya Shema. You need to surrender your mind in a way of Kabbalah Sale. What is Kabbalah Sale? What are you basically doing through the Shibud, through the Kriya Shema, which, by the way, when you put on Tefillin, you have to say Shema, right? If not, you're made Eidu Sheker B'atzmi. The whole concept of Tefillin is bringing the Nekuda of Kriya Shema to the next level. So the first Nekuda of Kabbalah Sale is taking the essence which is completely higher than any of the person's faculties, your attributes, the way you understand, the way you see things, taking the essence, bring it into your mind, into your heart, So the first Nekuda is taking completely higher than the person, higher than Yishtalshus, and bringing it into Yishtalshus, similar to, by the way, the second Nekuda in Akhtas Hashem that I was going to tell us, So when you do that, you're accomplishing the second and greater in Akhtas Hashem, bringing Ani into Havaya, Ani, which is Atzmus, into Yudkei Vavkei, into Yishtalshus. And then to step 2, when that great devotion of Kabbalah Sale eventually comes down to the heart. Step number 2 is when that mind, the greater than Yishtalshus, becomes a little bit more B'Yashvus, then it goes into the Midas, into the person, the way you feel, the way you see. So Kum Dois, similar to what we said regarding the Achdus Hashem that we create, this two Nekudas, this bringing the essence into Ishtalshus, and within Ishtalshus is making that Chibur of Meichin and Midas. So too when a Yid puts on Tefillin, he makes the Eiv put on Tefillin. And within the Tefillin itself, there's two Inyanim. When I bring the Kabbalah Sale of Kriya Shema into myself, into Ishtalshus, that causes the second concept, which is a greater concept, and the Havaya. And when a Yid later makes a Chibur of Meichin and Midas, right, within that, within the person, he brings it down to the lower parts, that is causing the first Indian, the Indian of Havaya Echod, that Yud K and Vav K are connected. Now that Rebbe is going to tell us in Ezayin that Be'emes, in Tefillin, it doesn't stop there. It's not just higher than Seichel, higher than Ishtalshus, Seichel, than Midas. It goes even lower. Tefillin has the straps, the Ritzuas, they go Lamatam HaTabor, and it's written on Klav Gashmi. Let's see. After this Hamshoch of Kabbalah Sale, that's completely higher than the person comes into the mind. And then it goes into the heart. And then it goes from there into all the keiches, into all the other attributes of the person, even in the lower abilities of the person's physical, mundane things. Therefore needs to go below the stomach. Also the concepts that are connected to the person, which are your lower half, not your spiritual side necessarily. You, need to also be surrendered, also have to figure out this is obviously bringing the Achdus Hashem to a whole new place. And when you complete within yourself that even the lower parts of the person, the heralikus, you create, that's how, when you complete yourself, it eventually can be spread, can be shared with the world around you. Also, the Inyanim of Welt that are mipagel chatata, the lower, more mundane concepts in our world. So in addition to the simple concept that Tefillin brings the Achdus Hashem into the physical object, the Tefillin, the cloth, the parchment, which is obviously makes it greater than Kriya Shema. Kriya Shema, it's a spiritual submission, it's more of a meditation. Tefillin is more of a practical, realistic object that you make physical thing holy. Which, by the way, that Rebbe throws in here in the brackets, which can be explained, this could explain why Tefillin Taka compares itself to every other mitzvah, because really that's the climax of mitzvahs. The perfect example of a mitzvah is Tefillin, where you take the greatest Achdus Hashem of Kriya Shema, the loftiest thing, and you bring it down to make a physical object holy, which is really the purpose of every mitzvah. Tefillin is really the symbolic mitzvah. Not just does it come down in mipagel and in Welt and in physicality, in yeshrus, but also in menagdim, in rebellious people that Mitzad are opposed. Like the pasuk says, the pasuk says, the nations will see that the Eibishter's name is upon you, and they will fear you. The Gemara explains this is referring to the tefillin that are upon the head or in the head. Even reaches people who you need to, so to speak, educate them. You need to be mechadish to them the concept of Yiras Shamayim. Why? Because these people are opposed to it. They'll never naturally figure it out on their own. They're not even in that direction. These are people you need to reach, and these people are affected through the tefillin. And they're going to explain it's not just any Yiras Shamayim, but it's the greatest, highest type of Yiras Shamayim. Why? Even a guy who's an edel guy, who does recognize and who does admit the Svan Eibishter, ultimately, they can only recognize the Eibishter which infuses our creation with energy. Teva. Yeah, you could see that the world is running, there has to be a creator. They don't know of Havaya, which transcends nature, which is supernatural. Like Parah tells Yosef, I don't know the Eibishter. Or Moshe Rabbeinu, yeah. All the conversations between Yosef and Parah was always with the word Elokim, right? Elokim Yana Shlem Parah. Parah only related to Teva. They should be Salmanich Tefillin, and Gilad Havaya should be Salmanich Tefillin. When a Yid puts on Tefillin, which is the greatest Gilad Havaya, when a Yid puts on Tefillin, Beifir Gam Maamar Tzvi Seidim, Zu Kol Am Yor, Sheb Zen Nichol Elu, Sheb Zaratzim Ina Meidim, Elokuz Gam Le B'Shem Elokim. The Rebbe says it here in the words of the Psukim. Not just Am Yoretz, but Kol Am Yoretz, even those which aren't on your team until this point. They are not Moida, they don't admit. On the contrary, they oppose. Roim, even these people can see, not just do they see, not just do they recognize, but it actually has an effect on them, the fact that they should fear Havaya Shamayim. So like the Rebbe Donei Zayin, taking to the next step, what does tefillin do? Not just does it bring the Kabbalah Sale of Kriya Shema into the mind, into the heart, then it also brings it into the lower parts of the person, from there to the lower Chalakim of Velt, not just the lower Chalakim of Velt, but even those who oppose, even the Am Yoretz, Kol Am Yoretz. This is the Nekudah of Tefillin, where it begins with the mind of the heart, but it eventually flows through the Ritzuas. Yeah. And now, like we said, how after every big concept in the Maamar, we connect it to the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. Moedik, Shmak, yeah, Yisches. Rebbe is basically going to tell us that this is really the whole Nekudah of Chassidus. Chassidus takes the greatest, highest things and brings it into every aspect of creation. So let's see. We can connect this to the revelation of Chassidus. It's interesting, the first time that Rebbe actually tells us here what is Chayel. Chayel is the Yemeledis of the Baal Shem Tov who established Teiras Chassidus HaKlalis, the general Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe is the founder of Chabad Chassidus. From the greatest emphasis, from the foundations of Chassidus, is that everything shouldn't be drawn down in its most realistic, practical way, in its most revealed way. Right? Like the Alter Rebbe tells the Shaykh V'Amunah, the pasuk says, your words are always in heaven, they are standing in heaven. And then the Alter Rebbe continues, so Pirush HaBaal Shem Tov Zal, the way the Baal Shem Tov explains this, these words of the Asar Maamar, when Hashem says, let's create light, let's create Urkia, right, a separation. Tevis, V'oisis, Elu, these letters and words that the Eibishter said, they are the code through which the Eibishter's energy flows through. So in other words, they are holding up the world right now. So in other words, Alter Rebbe says, there's a pasuk, and the Baal Shem Tov explains what this pasuk means. It means that the literal oasis are still in the world. They are the code that is the existence of creation. Now the Rebbe asks, the Alter Rebbe already brings that in the Medrash Tehillim, it already says this concept. When he says, it means the letters of the Asar Maamar of Hashem creating the world. Nevertheless, he says that the Baal Shem Tov is Masbrit. How come? What is one of the biurim? Shabal Shem Tov, Pirish, Fernande Gespray. Just another title word Pirish. I like what you say in Gemara in Pirish Sodin. Yeah, you spread out a sheet. Pirish can mean to spread out. Fernande Gespray. Vigila. He revealed it. Yudol Akoil. Shkoyach. It was a medrash Tehillim. It was a farvar from a medrash somewhere. The Baal Shem Tov fed it to Klal Yisrael. He made it the bread and butter of Yiddishkeit. He made the people see the world this way. That's what Chassidus does. It takes lofty things and makes it realistic. It makes it who we are, yeah? That's the whole gedank of Chassidus, and nothing stays too holy. Nothing's too holy for comprehension. for it to not just be comprehended, but for it to become practical, to utilize every Indian Torah, even the highest, loftiest things, pashut for your avodas Hashem. Yeah. What did the Alter Rebbe do after the Baal Shem Tov brought it into the world, spread it, so to speak? Now the Alter Rebbe draw down into Seichel, Shil Tehilel, Hashem Tiferes, which can become a crown of a person, the pride, the beauty. Koyal Chabad. And like we explained, tefillin doesn't say in the heart of the mind, it goes lower. It's understood in the rationale, in the literal seichel of the Nefesh Bahamis. To the extent even people who before learning Chassidus denied the existence of Hashem, their upper person, these people can figure it out as well. Yeah, now that we finished with that, this Nekuda, that tefillin, what is the Achdus Hashem? This is all answering our very, very first question. We create Achdus Hashem. To us doing avodah, we bring that the Eibishter's essence should come down to Ishtalshus, and that Ishtalshus, the Moichid, should come down to Midas, and everything becomes one. And that's with the avodah of Yid, because the Yid is connected to Atzmus, specifically to the avodah of tefillin. That's the idea of Chassidus. Yeah, that is all until this point. Now the Rebbe is going to go to explain really the third question. Why does the Rashba tell us that Havaya, Mart, Havaya, Mircha really begins with Hashem? It's Doidi Li Vani Loi. So what's Taich? So with Havaya, Mart, this is Pshat, summarizing, yeah. We compliment the Eibishter, we praise the Eibishter, we make the Eibishter one entity in the world, like the Pasuk says, Shema Yisrael, Yidin Her. The Eibishter is one, Shalish Yisrael, Havaya Echad B'Kriyashma, to the Eibishter, Yidin saying it first in Kriyashma. Befrat b'tefillin, and then we bring it one step down. Tefillin, like we explained. Shema p'shichim, avayachad gam miklav hagashmi. That causes that. What should happen? The Eibishter becomes one. How? Do the Eibishter putting on tefillin? Shema tefillin, that this is the greatest pride of Hashem. This in aroich that the Eibishter's achdus is felt in every aspect of creation. So that's pshat that we give the Eibishter shevach because we do mitzvahs. We bring the Eibishter achdus in Welt, and that makes the Eibishter become something be'en arich to what he would have been if you would have just left it to say the Shtalshus. Now the question is, how taka do we have the koyach to do it, the ability? How do our mitzvahs accomplish this much, right? Which is a phenomenal idea. Our mitzvahs make the Eibishter one. How? The reason, the way, the koyach, the strength. How do Jewish people indeed have this ability? That's what the Pasuk continues to explain. Havaya Mircha Liyasilam school. The Eibishter chose you to be a special nation. So therefore, the conclusion of that Pasuk is the Eibishter gives you the ability to keep Torah and mitzvahs. And the simple question is, keeping Torah and mitzvahs seemingly is the compliment that we give Hashem, right? This should be in the first Pasuk. The Eibishter is our nation, is our Eibishter. In other words, the first praise that we give the Eibishter is that we chose him to be our king, which includes lishmer chukim mitzvah, and we say taka to do his Torah mitzvahs. So why does it say later that the Eibishter chose us to do his Torah mitzvahs? Well, what's the answer? Very simple. Us doing mitzvahs has a tremendous accomplishment. The fact that we do a mitzvah, now the Eibishter does a mitzvah. This concept, this idea, the Eibishter did. In other words, the Eibishter chose us to be Am Skula, and now our mitzvahs have this significance, this koyach, this power. So really, who are to begin with? The Eibishter. That's why it's the Eibishter praising us. He made us, he gave us that ability. He made us significant. He made us, the fact that we can accomplish this much is our greatest pride, our greatest praise. So it's an Hashem's compliment to us. Now that we can conclude, that explains why the Rashba says that it all begins with Doidi Li, with the Eibishter to us. How do we have the ability indeed to compliment Hashem, meaning to make the Eibishter one, to make the Eibishter be ba'achdus, chativa achas, tefillin, our mitzvahs make the Eibishter be great, yeah, the greatest praise to Hashem? It's only right, the fact that we can add in the Eibishter's praise. It's only through first the Eibishter choosing us. So it makes perfect sense why the Rashba tells us that it's Deid Li V'Ni Loi. So why Taka is there the Pshat of the Marsha that's Ani Lo Deid Li? The Pashas, because when you get down to the more practical, we do a mitzvah, and that's how the Eibishter is one in the Welt. But if you got a little tiffer, that Ashbaz Vort is, really, ultimately, it all began with Hashem, because that's the only way we have the koyach to even accomplish what we do through the Torah mitzvahs. Now, in the last Eis Yud, second last Eis, before we connect it again to Chayelul, the Rebbe is going to tell us the answer to the second question. The second question was, why is the Jewish people the greatest complement of Hashem? As of now, until this Maamar, we explained how we can complement Hashem. It's Havaya Hamarta. We have the ability to make the Eibusher one. Shema Yisrael Havaya Echad is the greatest complement of Hashem. If so, ultimately, that's not what it says in Hashem's Tefillin. It doesn't say Shema Yisrael in Hashem's Tefillin. It says Mikam Yisrael in Hashem's Tefillin. It says us, the Yidden's greatest Maila in Hashem's Tefillin. That was the big question in the beginning of Eis Beis. So what's the answer? Finally, Eis Yud. Hine. Said ultimately, why did the Eibusher choose us? Right, we just explained the way we could accomplish what we do is because Hashem chose us. But why? Why did Hashem choose us, Doctor? Not because of anything special we had. Because again, when He chose us, it was before we did anything special. It's not because of our mitzvahs. The Eibusher had free choice. The Eibusher's essence chose us, not for any advantage, not for any benefit, not because of anything special about us. It's a segula. It's pasha. The Eibusher chose us. Why are we segula? Why are we special and unique? Why can we do what we do? Because Hashem chose us, which is before our Torah mitzvahs. Yeah. Yep. If Hashem didn't choose us because of any maila within us, it's not limited to any maila we have. So Hashem doesn't choose us more because we do mitzvahs. Hashem chooses us the way we are. Therefore, it's the essence of us. Again, if Hashem is not choosing us because of any maila, nothing external, it's about the Yid Alein. The Eibusher Alein chose the Yid Alein. Even now, after we were chosen, after we could do mitzvahs, that bechira never goes away. Every Yid, even before he does a mitzvah, every Yid is a segula. Every Yid is the Eibusher's chosen people. Now that the Eibusher chose us as a teitzah, as a symptom, as a result, we also have the ability to do Torah mitzvahs. And what else do we do? Mitzvahs, we can accomplish tremendous things. But where does this all stem from? What's the yisoid here? Eibusher chose a Yid. Havaya mircha. Now we understand why in the Eibusher's Tefillin it doesn't say Shema Yisrael Havaya Elokeinu Havaya Echad, which represents our avodah, that we make the Eibusher one. Because that's only step 2, that's a symptom. It says the cause, the root. The Eibusher chooses a Yid before a Yid does anything special, before he does Torah mitzvahs. It's a tremendous idea. What's the real tiferes, the real shevach? The whole Maamar we just explained that when a Yid does a mitzvah, the Eibusher does a mitzvah, which is tremendous giloyim. It's all giloyim. Ultimately, the Eibusher chose us, so it's the Eibusher's essence. When the Eibusher is proud of his choice, of the Jewish people themselves, that's a gilui of the Eibusher's essence. He didn't choose us because of a mitzvah. This is before any mitzvahs were around. That's the Melukat here. This answers our question more. After explaining the entire Maamar, understanding what our mitzvahs accomplish, now the Eibusher tells us, but how? The Rebbe tells us, how does our mitzvahs do that? Through us. B'meila, we, the Jewish people themselves, is the greatest shevel, the greatest pride. It touches the essence. Ois Yud Aleph. Now again, for the third time, we're going to connect what we're saying to Chayel. In addition, one of the primary Yanim Chassidus is everything come down Lamata. In addition, one of the primary Yanim Chassidus is the Neshama of a Yid, Avos Yisrael, right? The greatness of a Yid. And that's literally what we're just explaining. The Eibusher chooses a Yid. More than that. What's Chayelul? The beginning of the Avodah for the coming year. Beginning with Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, Shaz Machtim, what do we do in Rosh Hashanah? We crown the Eibusher. How does a Yid have the ability to inaugurate the Eibusher as a king? It's only because we're connected to his essence. Because if you think about it, before he's our king, right? Before Rosh Hashanah, he's not our king anymore. Before he's our king, no mitzvah is going to touch him. You don't have a mitzvah, you don't have a commandment, you don't have a king. Elamai, if the Eibusher loses interest in us, why? How should we re-arouse his will to take care of us, to be our king? Why do we want it altogether? Because that's an essential, intrinsic relationship, a connection that a Yid has with the Eibusher, Even when he's not our melech, we want him to be our melech. The melech transcends mitzvahs. Mitzvahs only come afterwards when Hashem is already our king. And the fact that the Eibusher accepts it, same nikud as etzim. Through that, the Eibusher becomes a melech of the ganze Welt. Through the Yidden, it goes to the next steps, the ganze Welt. Havaya lekeinu Yisrael melech mechusik mashal, which is from the tefillah of Rosh Hashanah, that the Eibusher becomes melech, king, and his malchus, his rulership, akil mashallah, rules over everything. Step number 2 is that it shouldn't just be a king, but it should be the Redeemer, Mashiach. What will Mashiach do? Fight Eibusher's wars, victorious, build the Beis Hamikdash in its place, and gather the scattered Jewish people, Havaya, which will bring us to a time when the day of the knowledge of the Eibusher will be one, Havaya, Kol ha'olam, including the Goyim, right? Maybe speedily. So what's the Nikud of our Maamar? What do we basically say? We asked 3 questions. Yeah? Our questions were, what's pshat that we are, first of all, what's pshat that we create Achdus Hashem? What's pshat that we are the greatest accomplishment? And what's pshat that the Rashba says that Havaya, Amarta, Havaya, Mircha begins with the Eibishter? And we answered beautifully. First we said, what's pshat that we create Achdus Hashem? It's very simple. If you would leave it up to say to your Shtal Shalus, Hashem would have just, so to speak, every level got less and less and less, and in our world there'd be no Gilul Likus. That's not Achdus Hashem. Atem asisuni chativa achas means we make the Eibusher one. We do a mitzvah, we're connected to Atzmos, our mitzvah makes the Eibusher do a mitzvah. That tefillah, the Eibusher, is bringing the greatest moichin into midas higher than the Shtalshalus, and happens through a Yid, doing a mitzvah, doing tefillin, specifically tefillin, bringing the Kabbalah Seil, the Sefter of Kriyashma into Moichin, into Midas, into Maisa, into everyday life, to extend it to the Goyim. So a Jewish person creates Achdus Hashem. Through us doing a mitzvah, we make the Eibusher do a mitzvah. Now, what's pshat? The Rashba says it starts with Hashem. Very simple. How does a Yid have the ability to do that mitzvah? Because it all begins with the Eibusher. Eibusher chose us. And therefore, answer question number 2, therefore the greatest pride, the greatest comment of Hashem is the Yid himself, before he does Torah mitzvahs. Because again, the Eibusher chose us. That's the essence of the Eibusher. Before we can do anything, in the middle, we had a few biyurim, how this is really the Nikud of Chassidus, side to bring it down the matter, side the idea of a Yid, side the idea of Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, and we had the Torah of the Malshantav and the Magid of Ata Kodesh Tel Yisrael, the whole Nikud of bringing a Likus Lamata Ba'aretz, making the Eibusher one. Each have a wonderful day.